Testing. I think people can hear me. Great. So, welcome everybody to our first official Dr. Brewer's office hours, or whatever we're calling this. I think it's office hours with Dr. Judd. So, it is unfortunate that we are creating this because of this coronavirus pandemic, but the silver lining is that it gives us an opportunity to all reboot and work together going forward as we work through these very uncertain times. So just to give everybody a format of what we'll be doing, first off, I'm Dr. Brewer. You can read my bio somewhere on this site. I'm also here with Josh Roman, who's the Chief Product Officer of Mind Sciences, and he is running the tech wizardry behind this today. He will also be moderating the questions session that we'll get into in a little bit. So we are here. I'm here live from, where do I live? Massachusetts. And I live in Worcester, Massachusetts with my wife. She's a professor at Holy Cross. And Josh is in Scituate, Massachusetts, which is on the coast. So the format for today is I thought I would give a very brief synopsis of some of the topics that I had been posting videos on last week on this YouTube channel. I'm sure some of you have seen those. Thank you for your feedback. And if you have any topics you'd like me to cover in the future, please post those in the comment section below the videos. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, you can do that, and that will make sure you get alerted when I post a new video. I'm going to be trying to post those in the morning every day, so it'll give you 5 minutes of something to wake up to that's not scary news. I promise it won't be scary, and you might even learn something. So for today, I'll give a brief synopsis of some of those topics from last week and some of the practices that I suggested folks start playing with. We'll do a quick discussion on those topics, so questions related to those specifically, and then we'll open it up. So I'm sure I see that people are joining us from all over the world, which is wonderful to see. We are really a world community right now, and it's great to see that we're all coming together from places. I see folks in Israel, folks in the Netherlands, California, which is sometimes feels like a foreign country to me, Canada, etc. So thank you all for joining me, and I think we can just go ahead and jump right in. So I'll give a brief synopsis for just a couple of minutes. We'll have a Q&A about those topics from last week. Then we'll open it up to general questions and a general topic discussion around coronavirus anxiety. So anything that you want to talk about that, and then we'll wrap it up. So maybe we can all just take a moment. I don't know if your life is like mine, but last week was pretty crazy, and it upended certainly my life, my wife's life. We're both sheltering in place right now is the right thing to do, and I hope you all are as well, no matter how hard hit your community is. So I find it really helpful to just take a moment to pause throughout the day, short moments many times. That's how we create habits. So why don't we all just take a moment to pause together in this world community that we are in. Maybe just taking a moment to feel into our body sitting, maybe feel into our feet. They're touching the floor, just feeling them ground us in this present moment. And let's take a moment to take some collective breaths, a community breathing together. So just consciously, at your own pace, consciously breathing in, just really feeling what that breath feels like as you breathe in. Noticing that pause, and then noticing when your body is ready to breathe out. And then just letting that go. Maybe even doing that again. And maybe taking a slightly deeper breath, noticing that, many of us, when we're anxious or panic, we take very shallow breaths. So just notice what it feels like to take a nice deep breath. And then whenever you're ready, just letting it out. Okay, I could do this all day. That's really helpful for me. So you can certainly practice these short moments many times throughout the day, but why don't we get into a review of the topics? So I posted a video on Saturday morning, I think, that kind of gave a summary of the 5 topics that I had covered the week before. I thought we could just briefly go through those. Repetition is helpful for learning. So the first item that I gave as a to-do list was to, basically whenever you notice that something triggers stress or anxiety, to really nip it in the bud by taking a few deep breaths to ground yourself in your awareness like we just did. And then to notice any urges to go on social media or call someone. And the idea is not to pick up the phone when we're freaked out so that we can prevent the spread of anxiety via social contagion. So I wrote in this New York Times article, I think a week ago or so, about how fear plus uncertainty leads to anxiety, and how anxiety coupled with social contagion leads to panic. So that's one of the main things is if we notice that we're panicking and we're about to pick up the phone, it's really helpful to just ground ourselves on our awareness and say, what do I need right now? Which actually leads me into the tip number 2 that I gave on Saturday, which was to make connection the new infection. So if we feel that need or urge to pick up the phone or go on social media, we can ask ourselves, what do I need right now? Not what do I want? I want this to go away. We all want this to go away. What do I need right now? And how can I meet that need? And often we need connection. That's when we go to pick up the phone or go on social media. So I think last Tuesday I posted a video where I demonstrated proper kitty cuddling, where my cat played along. He was actually purring in the video. I think you could hear that. Where, just take a moment to go and give our spouse or our kids or our pets a hug and cuddle for a little bit. That's a great way to help us calm down, help us stay connected and not spread social contagion. So that was kind of number 2. The catchphrase there was make connection the new infection. Number 3, I think on Wednesday I talked about how our brains treat the news like a slot machine. So if you want to know all the details on that, you can go watch that video. But the take home from that was to set some limits on when checking the news. I was actually talking to a reporter yesterday who spontaneously said to me, he said, this is so crazy that I have to actually limit myself to checking the news 2 to 3 times a day. And I was thinking, fabulous. You don't need my advice. You already figured this out yourself. So we can notice what it feels like when we limit ourselves to checking the news versus when we're constantly on it. And what he said was he felt much better. He felt more grounded, and he could actually do his job and write these articles that he was trying to write. So limit yourself to checking news 2 to 3 times a day. Don't check it at night. The video I posted, maybe the video I'm going to post tomorrow, I'm thinking about doing something around sleep, will also reinforce this message. It's really important not to get keyed up before going to bed. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to take it one day at a time. Certainly, many of us, we want to think into the future. How's this going to affect this? How's this going to affect that? We need accurate information to be able to plan into the future. We don't have accurate information for next month. I can almost guarantee that everybody on this call does not have enough information to know exactly what their life is going to look like in a month. For me, I don't even know what my life is going to look like in 2 weeks. I have a slightly better sense for 1 week from now, but really, I have a pretty good sense of what I'm going to do today, and that's where I'm staying. So the advice for there is to take it one day at a time. My patients have really trained me well in this respect with this saying in AA, one day at a time. They don't know if they're going to be sober in a month, but they can stay sober today and they can focus there. And it's actually much more grounding to know, okay, I can actually focus on today. It just feels better. It's less overwhelming. So for anybody that's feeling overwhelmed, notice if that overwhelm is coming from thinking way out into the future, and notice what that feels like. Notice that just makes you more crazy, and see if you can just dial it back. Okay, let me take it today. If today is too much, like the end of the day, let me take it to noon. If, or take it hour by hour, minute by minute, moment by moment. So that was number 4. And the last thing was related to, I think, a video I posted on Friday, which is about kindness and how, there's this process in psychology that I learned around thaw, shift, refreeze. And you can watch the video to watch the full thing. But the one-liner on that is that, all this energy from this coronavirus has actually energized the world. And we have the opportunity to shift into a different way of being and a different way of interacting with each other. We've been frozen in divisiveness and racism and sexism and lots of isms over the last years. And now's a time to realize what it's like to be connected, what it's like to be working together, and try to have that shift be so far away from our previous way of being that we can't go back, that we just see how it just doesn't make any sense to be divisive and mean to each other anymore. So I quoted a woman, I think her name was Kitty O'Meara, who had written a poem that went viral on the internet. And I also quoted one of my favorite poems in the world. Just thinking about it brings tears to my eyes. Naomi Shihab wrote this wonderful poem called Kindness. So I read a little bit of that poem on Friday in my video. You can check that out, or you can just look up her poem on the internet. It's, there's this line in there that gets me every time, that, when we see the size of the cloth, basically when we see the opposite of kindness, when we have lost things, when we are suffering, it's only then does kindness make sense anymore. It is only kindness that makes sense anymore, I think, is what she writes. And that is so true for me. And I hope everybody can touch into that so that we collectively have kindness be that new contagion, and we keep shifting and shifting and shifting as a world community to the point where we can never shift back into divisiveness. So that's the summary from last week. It was a wild week for all of us, I'm sure. But I think we can pause there. Maybe take a deep breath together again. Okay, maybe one more. And now we'll open it up for questions. So Josh is going to moderate the question pieces. Let's start with questions specifically about the videos that I posted last week, if you have any questions about those. And then we'll open it up more broadly in a few minutes. So as Josh gathers those, we can all just take a moment to take another breath, and I'm going to pull those up. Okay, so any questions, and this is for you, Josh, as well. Any questions from the topics from last week? Just to make sure they're clear. As we gather those, I'm going to try to demonstrate something else. So I mentioned on Saturday that it's really important that we nourish ourselves with healthy food. For me, that's in the form of a weird-looking plant protein or pea protein shake, but I think it's really important that we all really take care of ourselves. There's this meme going around, people feel like they're either going to lose 50 pounds or gain 100 pounds from this. If we can really keep ourselves grounded, we will actually maintain or get to whatever our healthy weight is. Okay, so I'm not seeing any specific questions for clarification from last week. So I think we can open it up to more general questions. And let me just give me a second to check in with Josh to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so I see some really great questions that are a little more broad, and let's just jump in right there. So the first question is dealing with stress around having a partner who's working out in the world right now and may not be as concerned about contagion. And then there's a part B to that, which is working together at home. So let me start with the part B, because I can certainly talk to this a little bit. And I think I'm going to post a video about this sometime later this week, because my wife and I are learning a ton from working together at home. So our home life is relatively simple. We don't have kids. We just have 2 cats, and they tend not to bother us too much unless they are starved for affection. And so my wife and I are both having to figure out our schedules, where we're both going to be teaching classes. I teach at Brown, and she teaches at Holy Cross. We're both going to have to be teaching at the same time, literally on the same days. So we're trying to figure out how we can, be far enough apart that we're not, teaching each other's classes, and also we're having to learn to just work through a bunch of things. I set up our den as an impromptu recording studio, and so we all have to work around each other's schedules. So one thing that we're finding is that it's really important for us to literally schedule time together. Because we could easily let it slip, where it's like, oh, we're sequestered at home. Of course, we're going to see each other, but that's really different than consciously spending time together. And we found that really helpful to take time, especially at the end of the day, to check in, to see how each other's days were in terms of what we did for the day, but also look to see okay, let's plan our schedules for tomorrow, because my schedule is constantly changing, hers is changing as well, and we find it really helpful just to sync up our schedules and to use that as a way to help us connect, and also have some grounding, because just that scheduling helps create some certainty where uncertainty existed before. We found that we can't plan the whole week in advance because it's changing, but we can plan one day in advance. And it's a really nice way for us to come together, put away all of our devices, and just connect for a bit, talk about our day, talk about the next day. So we find that really helpful. The other thing that we're starting to play with is, I shouldn't say starting to play with, I would say working harder at being better at, is noticing when either of us is a little bit irritable. So both of us have been not getting a ton of sleep over the last week. That's the video I'm going to post tomorrow. And with that, makes us more prone to being short, or my voice in particular can sound a little irritable when my mom calls it business mode, when I'm in business mode trying to get stuff done. And so it's really important for us to check in with each other and see if there's anything that we've done that inadvertently caused the other to get a little, riled up, to immediately eat our humble pie, pause, apologize. And for us, in particular, for my wife, one of the love languages is around just getting a hug. So giving her a big hug to kind of reset. So we found those really helpful. If you have any tips that you found really helpful for connecting with your partner, with your kids, or whatnot, I'd love to hear about them, because I want to put a segment together sometime later this week that talks about all the different ways that people are doing this. So if you can give a little story on what you're finding helpful and put it in the comments section or something, that'll not only help me, but it'll help others as well that read those comments. So that's dealing with stress around around having a partner working together at home. dealing with stress around having a partner who's working out in the world right now and may not be as concerned about contagion, I think that's a tough one. And I don't have great answers around how to work with that beyond really making sure that you keep your thinking brain online. And so be on the lookout for, is somebody in a stress mode where, stress tends to go into extremes. One is we panic, and the other is that we go into denial. And so, is that person in denial? And if somebody's in denial or panic, you can't talk them out of those in those times because they're not thinking rationally. You got to bring them back to center so that their thinking brain can come back online. And that's when you can actually have a conversation. So if somebody's off to the left in denial or off to the right in panic, make sure you don't go in there and try to tell them how it is or tell them that this is serious or try to bring any rational arguments in because they're not going to hear them. See how you can help support them so they can come back to center, and then you can have conversations. What I used to do this in medical school. When there was when a resident or somebody said something and I wasn't, I was like, is that really true? I wouldn't go in there and say, I'm the medical student who knows better than because I generally didn't. But I could go in there, and if I did that, I would be, it would be a little offensive, and they might, tighten up and get defensive. So instead, I found it really helpful, and I still find this really helpful, is to just ask questions, be like, wow, I didn't know that was true. Can you explain that? Can you help me understand this? So if somebody is saying, this is just a hoax or whatever, instead of saying, what, are you crazy? We can say, huh, so help me understand what I'm, X, Y, and Z. And that can really help, and not just say that in some rhetorical way, but really, like, I want to understand why somebody thinks, if somebody is really denying something, I want to understand what that is. And so the best way for me to do that is to really be curious and be like, okay, I want to understand where you're coming from. Help me understand that. What are you noticing? What are you seeing? Where are you struggling? So I think the questioning and the curiosity is a great way to help open and connect, rather than kind of throw some facts at somebody so that they feel like they've got to dodge. So hopefully that is helpful for dealing with stress around somebody who might not be as concerned. And I might even do a segment on denial. I'm trying to get a sense for how much denial is out there right now. I'm hearing some of it. I just heard about something in Eastern Europe today where folks in certain countries are not taking this as seriously as other countries. I want to get more accurate information before I actually put a full segment together, but somebody did ask me to talk about denial. So maybe I'll do that sometime later in the week. All right, so let me check out some more topics and we will keep going here. Okay, so somebody asked a very pragmatic question: how to manage fear when we're sick, whether it's with the coronavirus or just having a upper respiratory infection or something that has similar symptoms. Yeah, that can be tough. When we are physically ill, probably any of us that can remember the last time we had a big head cold or had the flu, it can be really tough to think. I remember, even though I get vaccinated every year for the flu, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, I got the flu. I don't think the vaccine wasn't particularly effective that year, and I proved it by getting the flu. And I remember just being laid out hard for like 3 or 4 days, where I was sleeping like 16, 18, 20 hours, and I was just groggy the whole time. And I went out, it was kind of late in the spring. I went out on our patio and was kind of sitting outside to get some fresh air. And because I wasn't thinking well, I was out there for a half an hour, and I got this sunburn on like half my body. And when I went in to see my primary care physician, to figure out what was going on, and she diagnosed me with the flu, she's like, is there something going on here? Because I have this red half of my body. So there's a great example of not being able to think clearly when somebody's laid out hard. And so whether it's the flu or whether it's coronavirus or some other upper respiratory infection, just know that your brain is not going to be thinking very well. And it's really important to make sure you surround yourself with support so people can make sure that you're fed and that you're hydrated and you're doing well. And the other thing is when we notice fear coming up when we're sick, maybe give ourselves permission and be like, to really see that fear and say, okay, fear, I see you. Let me focus on my physical well-being right now and see if we can just gently kind of let it head off to the side. One of my meditation teachers used to say, just place that off to the side for now. Sometimes that can be helpful. At other times, it can be really helpful just to acknowledge, okay, there's fear here. Am I, and check in with your surroundings. Am I safe physically? Am I safe? In a safe place? Do I have all the food that I need? Have I eaten lately? Have I drank, had enough fluids lately? Because those can actually exacerbate this fear. And then use mindfulness practices as a way to start to work with the fear. Sometimes when we're sick and we're not moving physically, it can be a great time to really be bringing a lot of awareness to our body and being curious about, okay, what does this feel like? What does this feel like? Just don't take it to an extreme. I was one time where I had a peritonsillar abscess, and I was like, I'm just going to use mindfulness because I didn't know it was a peritonsillar abscess, and I would almost had these vasovagal responses because the pain. I was just using mindfulness to work with the pain, and really what I needed to go was go to the emergency room and have that abscess drained. So make sure you're using your mindfulness. This is another place where I wasn't thinking clearly, but use your mindfulness responsibly and make sure there's somebody around you that can say, hey, let's get this taken care of. My wife was fortunately around and said, you probably should go get that checked out. And it was fine once they drained the abscess. Okay, so let's keep going with some more questions. So somebody asked the question around working with habits around food. The question is how to manage habits around food when the fridge is always a few steps away. So either eating too much out of anxiety or dealing with a loss of appetite due to anxiety. So I think this relates squarely with this meme around, I'm going to lose 50 pounds or I'm going to gain 100 pounds when all of this is over. So our natural physiologic response to stress is literally anorexia, meaning we lose our appetite. And it makes sense because, if we need to shunt all of our blood, and our body does this naturally when we have a stress response, it shunts all its blood away from digestive organs and frees that blood up and moves it to our muscles so we can run. So it makes, it's pretty straightforward that we would, many of us that have a normal physiologic reaction to stress would not be hungry. And I think probably everybody can relate to that. Sometimes we can develop these coping mechanisms that aren't physiologically based, but they're psychologically based, where we start to eat in response to stress. For example, one of my clinic patients, who was referred to me for panic disorder and also had generalized anxiety disorder, he was also 180 pounds overweight when he first came to see me. And what we had him do, I gave him my Unwinding Anxiety app and had him just go map out his habit loops around anxiety. What really surprised me was that 2 weeks later he came back and he said, I lost 14 pounds. And I said, what are you talking about? I thought we were focusing on anxiety here. And he said, yeah, I mapped out my habit loops around anxiety. The trigger was anxiety. The behavior was eating. And then the result or the reward from a brain perspective was that I could kind of numb myself out and feel a little bit better temporarily. He said, but it actually created more problems because he had hypertension and fatty liver and all these medical sequelae that were coming from him eating too much. He said it doesn't really fix my anxiety long term or even in the short term. So I just stopped doing it. So for anybody that's struggling with the eating too much side, where they find that they're going into the, they're wandering into the kitchen because they want something, right? They can ask themselves, well, what do I really need right now? Am I hungry? And if they haven't eaten in a while, then good idea to eat something. If they're not hungry, as in they've eaten sometime in the reasonable period of time, it's a great time to step back and really map out that habit loop. Oh, what's triggering my urge to eat? Am I going to food as comfort or distraction? And then what do I get from this? Just like my patient was doing, what am I getting from eating when I'm anxious? I'm just becoming more obese, et cetera. And see if that can help hack your reward-based learning system so that your brain is less excited to eat in the future. We've done some studies around this where we embedded a craving tool in our Eat Right Now app, and found one of my postdocs, Veronique Taylor, was as well as a undergraduate, Isabel Mosley, were leading this project, where we were looking to see how much we can change that reward value in people's experience after just bringing awareness to these situations. And we found that after just 10 to 12 times of people using this mindfulness tool, where they bring awareness to what it's like to do this, they could significantly reduce that the reward value of eating, and it predicted their eating behavior. So simply mapping out these habit loops and starting to really tap into this reward-based learning system through awareness, and just bring awareness to the behavior as we do it, it can be really helpful and effective, and may not take, it's not like a lifetime, not like years worth of work. It could happen relatively quickly. So folks could use an app to do that, but they can also just use their awareness and map out these loops and all that. And we actually have a short animation on my website. Maybe Josh can post that somewhere on reward value and how to hack that to change habits, such as eating. So we'll either post that in the comments section below, or maybe in this feed, so folks can check that out. Probably the comment section in the related to this video are going to be the best way to do that. Okay, so that was a great question. Hopefully, short answer is awareness. Generally, the answer is going to be awareness, because it really taps into how our brains work. But let's see how else we can use awareness to help us develop good mental hygiene. So let me go on to the next question. I'm gonna just take a breath. When I get excited, tend to speak fast. So noticing that, you just calm down. So the next question I'm seeing here is, I'm in an essential business and need to go into work, but I feel crippling anxiety about my health and my family. What can I do for myself and my family? Yeah, that's a really important question. So the first thing I would say is, thank you for your service. These essential businesses are essential for keeping us all, fed and safe. So I really want to just give a hats off to all the people who are out there delivering things, making food, and doing any of these other essential services that are helping the rest of us be able to shelter in place. So first, I just want to acknowledge that and thank you. Next, I would say, even though we don't know a whole lot about the coronavirus, and we're learning more every day, we do know a lot about viruses. The last great pandemic that we had was 100 years ago, literally. They didn't even know what DNA was back then. Purell didn't exist. Fancy wipes to keep things sanitized didn't exist. I don't even think they had invented plastic yet. So while we are learning, about coronavirus, we do know a whole lot about virology. My PhD is actually in immunology, and looking at the time course of the infection, it seems like people are developing antibody responses and immune responses in similar time frames to other viruses. So our bodies know how to handle viruses. We know how to handle viruses, which is all of the things that I'm sure everybody's been hearing, which is make sure, you're physically distancing and you're cleaning your hands all the time. things can also help, like not, getting out of the habit of touching our face, and other ways to help prevent the spread of contagion. But that's not unique to coronavirus. It's not some unique virus that has some magic way of transmitting itself. It gets transmitted in very similar ways to other viruses, and we know how to deal with those. So for the folks in essential businesses and feel anxiety by doing their job, I would say, first, ground yourself in reminding yourself that you're helping tons of people. I certainly think about that. When my wife and I went to the grocery store, I just felt this, like, these are my new heroes. These folks are out here helping everybody, and they were doing it cheerfully. Trader Joe's, the guy was using Purell like every 4 seconds, which is exactly perfect. So we can be doing the same thing, is just make sure that we are overdoing it on the hand sanitizer, making sure that we're following proper hygiene practices, and you'll see that those are pretty straightforward. But hopefully that grounding and reminding yourself that you are doing an essential service can help with that anxiety, help combat that anxiety. And the other thing would be short moments of mindfulness. When you notice that you're getting anxious, see if you can map out if there's something that's triggering it. See if you can bring some kindness and some awareness in. I've given some breathing practices. I've given some grounding practices in my earlier videos. Pick one of those that works really well for you and just rinse and repeat. Repeat it over and over and over anytime anxiety hits. The breathing practice is one of the simplest. And see if you can use that to help manage that anxiety. So thank you for your question, and thank you for your service. It's really inspiring. So let's check in with the next question. Take a deep breath together. Let that settle in. So this question is about how to manage anxiety about older relatives and how to help them manage their anxiety when you can't be with them physically. It's a great question. I've been seeing this, and I just practiced this yesterday. So my in-laws live in Seattle, one of the earliest hit places. My father-in-law is a physician, and he is still going into the hospital to help people. And he's not a spring chicken, So he's in a higher risk group, and he's out there as doing essential functions, putting himself in one of the places where he's most likely to come in contact with this. So obviously he's practicing proper hygiene practices. He's not freaking out. And as a way for my wife and I to connect with them, with my in-laws and her parents, we FaceTime with them last night. We haven't done that. We don't do that regularly, but we just spent an hour with them. It was dinner time hour, on the East Coast. It was in the afternoon, West Coast. And we just connected through FaceTime, and it was wonderful. It was a great way for us to all stay connected. And that is one of the blessings of technology today, is that even in the simplest forms of technology, we can connect through video. So as a way to connect with folks, pull out your camera, pull out your tablet, pull out your phone, your computer, whatever way you can, and whether it's Skype or Zoom or FaceTime or some other chat thing that, Google, whatever, just connect and do it regularly. Get in the habit of connecting with folks on a daily basis, or whatever is reasonable for you. Really helpful, really simple. We found it really effective. And when you start spinning out and worry about their health, ask yourself, what do I get from this? And start to hack that reward-based learning system and see that worrying isn't going to make them safer. Worrying only makes our brains go offline, so we can't think. So even if we were in the position to give them some good suggestions to follow, we wouldn't be conveying them well by conveying them when we're freaking out, because they'll catch that freak out by social contagion. So managing that anxiety about older relatives is very similar to managing any other type of anxiety. Notice what's triggering it. Is there a fear of the future? And use some of these mindfulness practices to help ground and connect virtually. You can spread some good connection through social contagion that way instead of fear and panic. Let's take a breath. We'll go on to the next question. So what can we do to help stressed out doctors, nurses, etc.? Great question. I'm going to do a segment on physician anxiety probably later this week. But I will say that we just finished a clinical study that was funded by the University of Massachusetts Memorial Hospital, I think, where we were just looking to see if our unwinding anxiety app would help anxious physicians. And we had started this study because physicians generally don't feel like they have time to do anything, and we're often not taught how to care for ourselves. And that lack of self-care, almost the opposite, we're taught to armor up, be strong, be tough, be the martyr. That actually makes us more susceptible to burnout. And so there's an epidemic of physician burnout right now, and that was there before this whole pandemic hit. And so I can only imagine what it's going to be like now. I don't want to think too far into the future because it could be anxiety provoking, but I can promise you that the prediction is that the physician burnout isn't going to decrease next week. So we did this study, long story short, we got a 57% reduction in these clinically validated anxiety scores with physicians just using this unwinding anxiety app. And we actually got a 50% reduction in certain aspects of burnout. And that was really surprising to us because we hadn't taught them anything in the app about burnout, but as they learned to work with their minds, they were able to let go of the things that were causing burnout and reduce that burnout as well. So that paper will be published in a couple of weeks, and we'll put some news out about that when it is. But right now, as a way to help stressed out doctors and nurses, I saw this beautiful picture of medical staff in some hospital where they were holding up signs, and somebody posted this on social media, where they said something like, we're here to help you. We're staying here to help you. Please stay at home to help us. So what I would say, number one, number two, and number three is stay at home. Shelter in place. Take that really seriously. It is really important that we all do this no matter where we are, because that's how we're going to stop the spread of this contagion. Period. That's going to help, the more doctors and nurses hear that we are actually taking this seriously and that we are taking care of, we're doing the right thing, the more we're going to help them out. I can certainly tell you as a physician, if my patient and I agree on some plan and they come back a month later and I say, how'd that plan go? And they say, oh, I didn't follow it. It doesn't make me more excited. I'd be like, great, you didn't follow the plan at all. So if physicians and nurses and healthcare workers are heeding this call for us to all to stay home, and we're showing them that we're listening, that is a great way to help them. Other ways that we can help them, I'm sure people can think very creatively about this, and certainly post comments below if you've got some great suggestions for how to help stressed out doctors, because I can also put those in my video. Don't spend a lot of time trying to get them on the phone or whatever. You can send them emails or supportive texts or things, just letting them know that you're cheering them on from the sidelines. I think that will help as well. And then keep abreast of your local community efforts. If your local hospitals or clinics or whatever are calling for supplies or other things, where they're calling for help, they'll do that in a way that's not going to spread contagion, and you can just keep an eye out for that and see how you can help locally. So that'd be another thing to do. I'm sure there are hospitals and systems in need that don't have the financial resources to pay for protective equipment and things like that. So you can, if you want to support financially, look for a good cause and see if you can help fund some of the protective equipment acquisition. And it feels good to give. So we can give in ways that don't spread the virus. Let's take a pause and go on to the next question. Okay. Next question is about how to deal with anger, not anxiety, over fake news and people not taking this seriously. Thank you for asking this question. I should make a note. Okay, Josh, let's make a note. Maybe we'll do something on this. We'll do a video on this because there's so much to say here and I don't have a lot of time. So I'll just kind of summarize this. So anxiety, I think we probably can agree, generally not helpful. Prefrontal cortex goes offline. We can't think well. When anxiety gets really riled up, gets fueled by social contagion or whatever, brain really goes offline when we panic. Now, there's this phrase. I was just looking up the definition of panic, I think, yesterday. And part of the definition, or one of the phrases that they used in the dictionary was blind panic. We're blinded by panic. Now, that's really interesting because there's a parallel with anger, blind rage. And so whether it's panic or rage, those are not actually as important as this blindness. So blind panic, blind rage, let's focus on that blind piece because we can learn something here. So when we're anxious, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. When we're angry, our prefrontal cortex goes offline. And that's really, really important to keep in mind. I wrote a whole chapter in my book about how anger is probably doesn't actually help us with anything. So here we can step back and ask ourselves, when I'm getting angry, is this helping? Am I spreading social contagion by getting other people angry? And is that the best way to proceed? I've had conversations with people about this and they're saying, well, but it gets me motivated to act. And I would say, great, channel that energy in a way. You've got that energy built up. If you're angry, you're going to act in ways that you're going to later regret. I can almost guarantee it. We're going to do something that's not quite on step as far as on it would be as it would be if we were not angry, because we're not thinking clearly, right? So take that energy, see if you can, kind of bottle that energy, calm yourself down from the anger, and take that bottled energy and say, okay, I'm motivated. What's the best way to proceed? And here, there we can take that and we can say, okay, how can I help most effectively and not fuel the fires of rage and divisiveness? It's like, oh, they're not taking it seriously. I'm taking it seriously. Notice how that divides us. We can channel that energy in saying, oh, let me understand your situation. What is it about this situation that makes you not think it's a big deal? Help me understand. So we take that energy and channel it in a way that's productive. It helps us connect with people rather than disconnect and be divisive. And from there, we can find common ground. One, we learn where the people are coming from. You're like, oh, this was your issue. I never thought of that. Or, that was your issue. We can then relate to them. We can connect with them. And only when we connect can we move forward together. So that's what I would say with anger, is to see, how is anger helping me? There's this phrase from the ancient Buddhist psychology where they said anger with its honeyed tip and poisoned root. So they're really talking about how, oh, it just feels so seductive to get angry and because I'm doing something. But it's poison. It poisons us. It poisons everyone. It creates divisiveness. We've got to let go of anger, channel, bottle that energy, and bring it forward in connection and moving forward that way, because that way our thinking brain can come back online and we can work most effectively. So thank you for that question. I think that would be a good topic to make a video about, and I will try to do that soon. Let's take a pause. Take a deep breath before the next topic. All right. How to deal with feelings of loss and change, like grief and disappointment over the current situation. Life's so different, and people I know are losing their jobs, and the future is so uncertain. Well said. That's what I'll say first. Well said. We're looking at all of these ramifications where local businesses are going to really struggle, especially local restaurants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Life is going to be different. We can't go back. And people are losing their jobs. I think Harvard just fired all of their cooking staff because the students have gone home. Just one example of where I'm sure we're seeing this all over the country and all over the world. So there is loss, there's disappointment. I'm sure all of us have had disappointment around something being changed or canceled. All of us have had grief around loss of something. So how to deal with these? I think the first step here is seeing if we are resisting or denying those feelings, because they're real. They're part of our natural response of being human. And to see if we can just hold those, oh, here's grief, here's disappointment. I love this image that the monk Thich Nhat Hanh describes, where he actually uses this, I think, with anger, but we can do this with grief and disappointment, where it's like, okay, can we hold this like our child? And if we don't have children, can we hold this, as like we've held any children, any babies that we've known, or even pets, can I hold this? And that helps us not push it away. It helps us not reject what is actually happening. And that's a critical first step, is to be with what is. And then see if we are spinning out into the future and projecting about how bad things will be in the future. That is what feeds anxiety and panic. So see if you can notice that. See if you can nip that in the bud. Oh, there's my mind spinning out again. Let's start with today. Let's start with today. So see if you can hold these feelings. Let them express themselves. They're going to work their way through us at their own pace. We can't force them to move faster or anything. So we just have to see how much we can accept them and love them for what they are. For anybody struggling with this, I'd highly recommend a poem by Rumi called The Guest House, where he talks about welcoming all of our emotions in, be it the shame, the malice. I think anger is in there as well. And seeing if they are freeing us up, basically to learn. Can we learn from them? Okay, let's take a pause. I think we're going to have time maybe for one more. Okay, do you have any specific recommendations for those in the helping professions in how to best support our clients through this whole thing and also taking care of ourselves? Great question. These are all great questions. So here I would say start with oxygen mask theory. So there's a very complex, I think must be particle physics theory around, if you're in an airplane and there's no oxygen and the oxygen masks fall down, your job is to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. Okay. So that's really important, because if we are not grounded, if we're not in a place where we can support others, then we're just going to spread emotions like fear and panic and anxiety through social contagion. So it's really important. My specific recommendation for those in the helping profession is to make sure that you are helping yourself first, and don't see that as, oh, no, I'm not, I got to be helping other people. I don't have time to help myself. The only way you're going to help other people is by helping yourself. So make sure you do self-care, meditation, prayer, exercise, healthy diet, all the stuff that y'all know. Do it. Don't say, I don't have time to do this. Do it. Okay. And do it for others. Know that by being at your best, you'll be able to help many more people, and that will have important ripple effects. So that's the first thing. And I'll just say, pragmatically speaking, my outpatient clinic is now moving to telemedicine. So starting this week, I did a little bit of this 2 weeks ago, I think, where I started doing phone calls with my patients. So, talk to your system. If you work in a hospital or a clinic, or if you're working by yourself, check to see what you can do to quickly set up telemedicine. I like things like Zoom. And so I'll be seeing my patients for who knows how long via video conferencing. We're going to probably use Zoom to do that. So find ways that you can still connect with folks. The visual is really important because 70 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. So being able to see each other and hear each other is really, really important. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. I think, let me just look at this last question. How to stay in body, emotion, heart, and head at the same time, especially when my emotions are all over the place. How can I stay grounded? I would say pick one. If you notice that you're all over the place, pick one. I love the grounding in your feet. Let's just do this, actually. We're going to do this together as a way to finish today. So just wiggle your toes. If your feet seem very foreign to you right now, wiggle your toes and let them come to rest. And if you want to, you can kind of even just breathe in and breathe that breath all the way down to your feet. Or if that seems a little woo-woo, simply just feel your feet. Just feel what your feet feel like grounded solidly on the floor. Notice if your mind is running off this way or that. Just notice where it's gone off to and simply use your feet to re-anchor in the physical sensations that you feel right now in the present moment. And maybe we can use this as a great way for us to close together. Just expand your awareness from your feet to just noticing what it's like, what it feels like to be in community together in this ad hoc community that we've just created over the last hour, all of us together. Maybe take a moment to silently offer yourself and everyone else on this call some well wishes, whatever resonates with you very strongly. Simply, may you be happy, may you be healthy, whatever it is. Offer that out. Feel the connection. And see if you can carry any of these pieces forward with you into today, into tomorrow, into this week. Anything that was helpful. You can check out the comments section from the video I posted today. There's a new website with a bunch of resources that are all free, and that's going to get updated. So check that out. We've got a free Breathe by Dr. Judd app that you can download if you want to really get some short mindfulness practices that you can bring in throughout the day. So not only does it have a tactile breathing practice, but it also has some of the core practices that we have in our eating and our anxiety apps. We pulled those together and just put this out there to try to be helpful. So you can check that out if you need an app to help you stay grounded in the present moment. I think, Josh, is there anything else I should mention? I will remind you that I will be doing these office hours weekly for the near future. So join us again if you found this helpful. Let others know about it if you think it would be helpful for them. Check out the videos that I'll be putting up each morning. And if there are any of these resources that you find helpful, please share them with others. so that we can all move forward together. So thank you all, and maybe we'll see you next week. Take care.